Morning, folks, and welcome to another in our program of Talk Sports. And this evening, we'll be going a little to basketball. Yes, we'll be talking basketball. And our special guest this evening is no other than the great, if I should say, Johnnie Jackson. Well, his first name is John, but he's known as Johnnie. I think most people will be able to relate to him as Johnnie. Let me say good evening, well, good afternoon where you are, Johnnie, because Johnnie's on the west coast of the United States. Welcome to Talk Sports.
Thank you for having me. It's actually afternoon. It's probably evening. You guys are 3 hours ahead of us, so it's afternoon for me. So thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's nice seeing you, Johnnie. And just an apology to our viewers who are looking. You may see something in the background that you may or you may not like, but there's nothing we can do about that, Of course.
Yeah, there's something right next there that everybody gonna like. See that?
Okay, right. That's great.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. But
take the good with the bad.
Yeah. And in all honesty, Johnnie is over on the West Coast, so you will have to understand why he is showcasing his preference. And seeing as we're talking basketball, Johnnie. But how things with you? How have you been coping with the pandemic, Johnnie?
I think just like everyone else, it's been difficult. It's different. It's new. My wife and I are fortunate that we're able to work from home. So it's not really affecting us on the employment side, but the kids are at home. They've been at home since mid-March. They're really chomping at the bit to get back to school and get back to some sense of normalcy. That's the difficult part, like keeping them occupied, trying to give them some kind of understanding or sense of what's happening. I have a 16-year-old, actually just turned 17 last week, who's a senior in high school. I have a freshman who is 14. I have a 10-year-old who's in the 4th grade. And I have my granddaughter who really manage the whole process of distance learning. So that I can say is probably the most difficult part, but we're coping. We're getting there.
Okay. Well, glad to hear that. And we just had a little problem when you said about your granddaughter. You said she is what
she is 6. She is 6 years old. She is in kindergarten at this time. I have an older son, my stepson Darius, who at the age of 22 had a kid. So we have her every now and then, so she spends time with us.
Okay then, glad to know, and we probably get back to the family in a moment. But glad to know that for the time, family is okay. But in starting off our program, Johnnie, if probably you can relate to us how actually you got involved in sports back in Grenada. I mean, most times it's at a very early age for most of the people we have been speaking to. Obviously, it has to be at a very early age. So how you got involved?
Well, sports in general, like you said, everybody was involved in some kind of sports, right? Since you were like 3, 4, 5 years old, if you can kick a ball, you're playing football or any chance you get, and cricket. So those were the 2 sports that I was kind of involved in as a very early age coming up. And it was almost automatic for every school that you went to that you had to run track too. So I was fortunate enough to be gifted with some athletic ability that I was able to perform at a decent level, right? So while I was in primary school, I ran track, and I went to Sunnyside private school, and did my common entrance from there and went to Presentation Brothers College. So I'm an old boy from PBC. And shout out to all the old boys from PBC that might be listening at this time. I really I really gravitated towards basketball more in my, probably I would say my form 2 years of PBC. And fortunately for me, I was growing pretty tall throughout that time. So a lot of the skills that were necessary for basketball kind of came sort of natural to me. It was, I believe there was a teacher that came to PBC, spent about a year. I think his name was Jim Ganter, and he kind of exposed the sport a little bit more to us. As you know, basketball is not something that's really prevalent. So it was taking an avenue that wasn't necessarily something that people were too interested in. Basketball at that time was something you watch on TV, in those days. And just so everyone knows, since I was 7, 8 years old, I was a Laker fan, right? I used to watch Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jamal Wilkes, all those guys back in the day. So ideally, I started out with, the traditional sports that everyone does back home, but I gravitated to basketball around Form 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but in any way, there was any other sports you had an interest in? I mean, I know you dabble in football, for example, but were there any other that you really had an interest in case probably things didn't work out in basketball?
Well, I would say football for sure, because my dad was, a well-known national player for several years. He was a national captain for a number of years for Grenada. I guess I was supposed to be somewhat of a football prodigy growing up. However, I tell you the truth, getting kicked on the shins and getting slide tackled when it's raining, it wasn't fun for me. So one of those things that I didn't really too much like. So I kind of gave up on football a little bit. Even though I played here and there, it wasn't something that I put a lot of emphasis into. When I got exposed to basketball, it was like a light switch turning on for me. It just happened. It seemed natural. It seemed like something that I wanted to do. I was very passionate about it from the jump. So yeah, it's that. I guess I could say football was this other sport that I was interested in some capacity, but basketball took over quite quickly.
Yeah, but someone like Johnnie Jackson involved in sports in Grenada, people will look at you as probably, quote unquote, apart from basketball, normally they'll say he may be a good high jumper in terms of track and field, or he may be a good fast bowler in terms of cricket. Any of that played in your mind around that time, especially competing for PBC? Oh, I think we would have lost Johnny for a moment. Let's see if we can get him back. Interesting enough. Yeah, I think he's back now. Yes, I was asking you, Johnny, in terms of your height, competing in sports at high school in Grenada. What will come to mind at that time would be, apart from basketball, Johnny maybe probably, better served in probably as a fast bowler in cricket, or probably even, in track and field, high jumper. Anything that was playing in your mind at the time? Are you there, Johnny? Okay, I think we're just having a little problem with Johnny. Let's see until we get this straightened out. Okay, so I think he's back now. Yeah. So I think
is horrible.
Yeah, I realize that. Sorry for that. West Coast, East Coast.
It's a long way, right?
Yeah, we have a little lag. Yeah, but just getting back into the conversation about what are the sports that, whether cricket was part of the the urge, probably high jumping, track and field. Which of those?
Yeah, I played cricket. I was mostly I tried to be, I guess, a fast bowler of some sort. I even tried being a spin bowler. I was not necessarily that that good at being a batsman, but I tried everything, and it's one of those things with cricket, the equipment to really get involved and be disciplined with that approach is for that sport, it's expensive, right? Just to buy a bat or a ball and pads and face shield and all of that, that stuff is expensive. And it wasn't necessarily something that was readily available to me as a kid coming up. I do still like the sports. I try to watch cricket every single time I get an opportunity on the internet. It's not necessarily something that's readily available here on the sports networks in the USA. And I try to stay up to date with what's happening with the West Indies and, the Windward Island teams and so forth. But as a kid growing up, I just played cricket like everybody else. A lot of times if you're playing cricket, a lot is because you're doing it like on the beach or on some kind of pavement somewhere where a bunch of you and your friends get together and you get a tennis ball and you make a bat out of palm tree leaves, branches, or whatever you have, because equipment for that sport was extremely expensive. And it wasn't something that, let's say, the schools were making readily available to athletes that could potentially want to go in that direction. So that wasn't something that, just from that perspective, I would say wasn't something I was really interested in at that time too much.
Okay. And you mentioned your father having some part to play and as an influence to sports. And by way of introduction, John's father is, he's known as Major Jackson. Is there any way that he really had an influence into you in getting directly involved in sports? And everyone knows Major Jackson involvement in football, representing, I think it was Ottons, one of those local clubs, and then the national team. But what sort of influence he really had you getting involved? And I mean, you choosing basketball rather than probably football.
Well, the influence I would say from him was watching him play, learning of his accomplishments. A lot of it was mostly me wanting to kind of be like him in that capacity in terms of sports, or to be that known. However, at that time, he was, heavily involved in his craft at that time. And, like most kids growing up, it was really difficult to have kind of parental involvement with your development when they're busy playing themselves, And during that time, while I was growing up watching him, yeah, everybody's like, oh, that's Major's son. But it doesn't really mean that I'm talented as he was in that same capacity. And I would, play with friends, play on PVC team here and there. But it wasn't something that I really sought out with passion. Basketball I did because it was in me to do that. That was my area, that was my path, that was my interest. And I don't think if my dad was with me all the time, coaching me with football, if I would have done anything any different. The interest that I have for football is nowhere near to the passion that I have for basketball. And that's something that was just built in from day one, I guess, when I got exposed to the sport.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about your passion for basketball. Let's probably go into recalling your playing days back, playing for sorry. I started something that I
not GBSS. Don't say GBSS.
Yeah.
Don't make that.
Yeah. Well, you terrorized GBSS. So played for the presentation college, and then obviously the Institute for Further Education, and then your national team. Let's recall your playing days. Some of the rivalries, and in whole involvement in playing basketball at a local level.
Well, I'll tell you what, in the first year that I got exposed to basketball, just learning the sport, I was about 13, 14 years old, which at this time, these days, that's old. My boys are involved in sports and are playing and have been playing basketball since they were 7, 6 years old, right? So it's a whole different era, I guess, right now, or a different process in terms of youth development. But when I started, I was about 13, 14 years old. And that was just learning fundamentals, learning to shoot, rebound, stuff like that. There were no intercollegiate or inter-high school competitions that was organized by the powers that be or those that were responsible for doing that on the island. So where I started, even before I played for PBC, was I started on Melville Street Court. I don't know if you remember where that is, where the old police barracks is, right?
Yeah.
I started there and I started watching a lot of the older cats, like the Redhead brothers and, Tigges, Christopher Bernard, and Bugman and Super and guys like that, watching them play because they were older than I were. And I couldn't even play anyways with them because I had to wait till they were done. Guys my age to wait till they were done playing before we get a chance to play. So watching those guys play, trying to emulate what they were doing, right? And what we did when we were kids, there were nothing, like I said, there were no competitions, no tournaments, nothing like that organized for us. So we self-organized. We wrote letters ourselves and we went around to the private sector, the businesses right in town right there, and got them to sponsor our first tournament. I remember Anton Antoine and Xavier and a couple other guys like that were really instrumental in starting that. And the first team I ever played for as a young kid was it was sponsored by through Gittins Pharmacy at a product they had called Suntop. So we created that team, started our own little youth tournament, and that's how we kind of got noticed from the older guys. Then I played with Honved for a little bit. They recruited me on there, and I played for them probably about a year, maybe a year and a half. And then during that second or third year, when I was like in Form 4, Form 5, that's when, I started playing for PBC, playing against GBSS and other teams like that, Westmoreland and all those teams. And through that process of development, and it's kind of more like self-development and just watching older cats, it was difficult to improve quickly. But at the same time, the journey was worth it for me because there were so many individuals along the way that gave me pointers. I'd say the one person, and I'll always say this, the one person that pulled me aside and talked to me about my game as a young man growing up was Christopher Tigges Bernard. If it wasn't for him, I would not have gotten to where I am right now. He really took me under his wing and just taught me a lot about the game. And Tigges from the football days. I don't know if you remember him, that he was a really great basketball player.
Yeah, very well, yeah.
He was one of the guys that was instrumental in winning our first OECS tournament in Grenada when we played with Jawise Cox and Schoon and guys like that, So he was that guy that really took me under his wing and showed me a number of things and helped me improve my game. And then in getting to play for the national team, even before that, let me backtrack a little bit. There was a national, it was called the Windward Islands Games, I think it was called. And there was, track, basketball, football, all these sports that you would, travel to one of the Windward Islands and compete against other high schools, right? The very first team that was selected, I didn't make it. I wasn't picked. I didn't even get called to tryouts, right? That's when I was in Form 4. And that event kind of motivated me to work on my game big time. I used to get up, 6, 5 in the morning, run down to Carenage Court because at the time my family and I had moved to Tempe, right? And if you know how far Tempe is from Carenage, you can envision that, right? I used to run up Maras Hill and run down to Carenage Court to practice every morning before I went to school, right? There would be no one there, and just be me, right? So throughout that time, that's how I worked on my game, every aspect of it that I could, think of, along with advice from older players that I've played with, to get me to the point where I was selected the next year to go to the Windward Island Games as well. And I went there, did well. In that year, I got selected for the first time at 17 years old to play for the national team. And I remember back then, Mark Muller, he was a Peace Corps guy that wasn't Grenada at the time. And I remember him coming to our house in Tempe to speak to my mom and dad about me going with the national team to play in St. Lucia.
And because you were a young boy at the time,
yeah,
right?
I was still in school.
Still in school, yeah. Okay, but what it was like, the playing conditions. Let's talk about the commitment of those players. All these things. With you as a young lad among the men, playing on the national team.
Yeah, I gotta say it was a hell of an experience. I, I learned a lot. I got an opportunity to interact with guys I always looked up to, and the respect level coming back to me the other way from them, it was unexpected, right? But it was something that kind of comforted me a little bit, helped me build my level of confidence in myself, to know that if they have confidence in me, then I gotta go out there and produce, right? And that's what I did. Playing for the national team at that age, I was this thin, scrawny kid, right? Getting pushed around a lot, but my teammates didn't give up on me, and I ended up being one of the better players for years to come as a result of those experiences. The commitment of those guys back then, I can't comment too much on what's happening now, because I know very little about what's happening in Grenada regarding the sport at this time. I only hear things here or there. Some of it through conversation with Coach Naka Joseph, who also coached me as well at the national level. But the commitment of those guys to work individually on their craft was, extremely. It was something that I look back at now, and I don't know how they continued with very little support to have that level of commitment. I remember playing pretty much every day, even when I had homework. When I got home, I would hurry up, get home, do my homework, because the one thing I couldn't leave the house if I didn't get my homework and stuff done, right, and my chores done, and head back down to the court, and we would play till like something like 8, 9 o'clock at night, and the commitment to continue to play and to continue to work hard, it was something that is unmatched, that I've seen in my life. Kids these days, they're a different breed. There's a lot of expectation in terms of what should be given to them, and they don't necessarily want to go out there and earn it on their own. Someone has to push them. The guys that I played with back then weren't that. They were very much self-motivated.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, interesting indeed, and I guess as much that would have molded you into the type of player, or the kind of player you will eventually be. Let's look now at the transition from Grenada into the United States, and the different conditions you would have met in terms of the training, the facilities. How are you able to transition from the Grenada type to that in the United States?
Well, I tell you what, it was easy, believe it or not, because as well as I do, the conditions back home aren't that great, right? The majority of the courts are outdoors, right? Depending on the weather, right? Depending on the weather, you might or might not be playing, because if it's raining, you can't be out there playing, right? So that kind of impacts your ability to continue to train, right? So getting here and being exposed to indoor facilities, tell you what, it was a lot easier on my knees, my ankles. The training was rigorous. Yeah, it was probably 10 times what I was used to from back home because we didn't play that much in terms of tournaments and different leagues. We played probably 12 games a year. No, moving from that to playing 30 games a year in one season, that takes a lot out of you. But and also to survive the season, you need to prepare, right? So back home, I didn't focus a lot on weightlifting. And no one even really brought it up as a thing to do, right? I had to be up at 6 a.m. For weight training workout every day, right? Preseason, you got to run the track, 400 meters, 300 meters, like you are training for a track meet, right? To get your endurance up. And then there's in-season training. That is a combination of all of that, along with, working out with and shooting drills, rebounding drills, whatever it is, looking at the X's and O's, going over film, which is something we never did. And I must say, I don't know if it's available now, but archiving the activity and the history of this sport, or any sport, as a matter of fact, in Grenada, from a videographics perspective, was never there, right? If that happened for you, it's because someone in your family did it for you individually, right? And a lot of the, great moments that I have, like I can recall, some of them I can't recall because I'm getting kind of old. I'm getting up there in age, right? A lot of those great moments, no one knows about it, right? It's not there anywhere for anyone to see. I remember taking my kids back in 2016 for Carnival, and there were a number of people coming over and saying hi to me and stuff, and we're talking to my wife and my kids about, oh my God, how good he was in basketball. And my kids don't believe it. They don't believe I was that good. They're like, oh, they're just playing that. There's no way, right? And that's because there isn't any evidence to really prove that to them or anyone else, So being exposed to that different type of approach and looking at practice film and game film to prepare, it was something new to me, but it was something that elevated my game big time.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's important that you're speaking about that because we realize that in previous programs is something that came up in terms of documenting and archiving. And one of the viewers, actually, Roger Augustine, is actually saying that's why I'm doing my part to encourage, motivate, assist every chance I get and encouraging more parents to get involved and do the same. Hopefully it spreads and viral videos. In fact, Roger has a daughter who is actually a top sprinter, her age group, and he is doing his part in ensuring that he documents her progress. And he has been doing that for probably the last 2 years, I think, because he has even shared with me videos of her competing every single, meet she goes to, a competition. He probably has a video of her competing. And I think that is what you're actually alluding to. Yes. That could be the way to go now, that if probably you all had that sort of, opportunity, as you would say, junior time, thinking about, documenting, archiving, it would have been easy probably for you to convince your kids that you were the best, at the time,
Yeah, but not only that, there's another layer to it, Michael, to the extent that I think there's an obligation on news media outlets on the island to also cover those events, right? Not just the ones that, that are at the National Stadium and we have these world-class sprinters here, not just those ones. I'm talking about the ones that happen up in Laborie or in my day, up in Grenville in the market where their court was, right, at the time, right? Or up in Guelph. I have no idea what the state of the courts are these days, but when we played, there were some really great moments and some great athletes that weren't necessarily named John Jackson, right? There were other people that were great as well that no one knows about, right? So being able to cover those and to have access to it over time, I think is also important.
Well, yes, I will want to agree to an extent. I always say that we have to probably differentiate the role of the media, because yes, the media will be able to provide the coverage so that it will have a wider audience. But when it comes to archiving and thing, I think it's sometimes it's the role of the or the responsibility of the respective associations, right, to have their own, recordings and archiving of materials, because the media may be able to go and record or show games, but they're using it for their purpose of probably showing it. They may use a couple seconds for the purpose of airing, a news item, etc., etc. But I'm talking about archiving. The media, that's not the media's role in terms of archiving, this sort of thing. So I agree with you, yes, but at the same time, I think the media role it should be to bring to the wider audience. So a live broadcast of a game, or they can record it, show it on a weekend, whatever it is. But
Sure.
archiving,
I
yeah.
can agree with that. And I do think in most cases, you think about where we're at, right? We're talking about Grenada with over probably about 110,000, 115,000 people. The access to resources to be able to do that on your own, it's limited, right? So if you do have media coverage, I think there needs to be some level of collaboration between the media outlets and the National Association to ensure that we can pull those things together and build the archive.
Right.
Right.
That's where the association comes in terms of collaborating, as you say. Yeah,
Sure.
that's an important point. I've seen you in your prime, and I know how great a player you are. You are one of the reasons I love the game of basketball. It's Elcock now.
Yo,
So,
Cock, how you doing, my man?
right. Elcock is saying that. And yes, when our athletes go pro and become successful, there is little or no videos of them in their junior years, and that's sad. And we do know that, we would have seen, especially when you're exposed to the US system, where they will have archives of, professional athletes since they were in probably kindergarten, because they do that, when they have to, feature them. They show them from as early age into high school, middle school, high school, college, everything like that. So I do recall Johnny. It's a very smart, intelligent player. That's Patrick Simmons, former sports minister.
Yes.
And
They used to call Mr. Simmons tricks back then.
Yeah. And Roger says sometimes when these athletes are recognized and there's no evidence to show the future generation for inspiration, it's sort of sad. And that's where it came in terms of you trying to convince your kids that you were that great. That should not have been a problem. They should have been watching the tapes. But talking about the kids before we move on further, you have one who is actually a basketball player or American football player.
Yeah, well, all my kids play a combination of basketball, volleyball, stuff like that. So my oldest, Jalon, he's good at basketball. He's extremely good at track, and he's really good at football. So currently, we're going through this COVID environment and the recruitment process because he's a senior in high school now, looking at opportunities for him to move on via scholarship to other schools to play football. So that's his. So I play basketball, right? My dad played football, as the rest of the world know it, right? But they call it soccer up here. So I followed my passion. He's following his passion. That isn't necessarily the same path as mine, right? So he is going after football. He's doing a really good job at it. He has an amazing work ethic. I'm not sure where he got that from, but he puts the work in. He's always in lifting, working on agilities, stuff like that. But actually, we just went to a showcase that was organized by National Preps over here on the West Coast in Fresno, and he was voted the MVP for wide receiver at that showcase. So he's really putting the work in. I anticipate that, wherever he goes, he's going to be successful.
Oh, wow. Well, good to hear that. And let's see, Clev is saying that's Clev Deputy in video archive preservation is very, very helpful and important. Was instrumental when my son made it as a walk-on at Ohio State, both basketball and football, but got exhausted with discipline exercise before him. And Kester Elcock is saying, Grenada needs a Hall of Fame. Naka's new book is a step in the right direction. Doing this on a national level will capture some of the great players that paved the way for future generations. So some very interesting comments coming in there. But let's talk about your involvement at the college level, because you did mention about playing and training, etc.
Right.
Is that the Notre Dame do Namo?
University? Yeah.
Yeah. What's the end of it? Notre Dame
Dinamere University.
Dinamere University. Okay, and that's on the West Coast as well, right?
It's on the West Coast. It's about 2 hours away from where I live right now. When I transferred from junior college, I played my last 2 years of eligibility there.
Which junior college?
I went to Modesto Junior College. That's where, when I left Grenada, that's where I went to.
Modesto, yeah.
So I spent my first 2 years there, transferred to Notre Dame Dinamere University and finished off there. Spent an extra year, did my MBA and finished up all of that stuff there. But it was, like I said, it was a whole different level of play. They are NCAA Division II. And when I came out here, I was 26 years old. That's considered old to start your college career, right? Generally, you would want to start right when you get out of high school, more like when you're 17, 18, 19 years old when you graduate. So for me, the biggest thing was when I got here, there were kids that were 7, 8 years younger than me that were playing on the same team, but I wasn't the best anymore, right? I was good. I was good enough to be on the team, but to be the best, you got to work really hard. You got to expand your game. My size was considered big back home. Here I'm a guard, right? I'm not playing center. So now I got to develop skills that I didn't really work too much on back home, but coming at, I played point guard, I played 2 guard, I played 3 guard. And working on those skills and fine-tuning those skills that I didn't necessarily focus on throughout my career, even playing for a national team in Grenada. So that experience was, immediate. It was immediate for me that I had to change the way I played and look for opportunities to get into the starting lineup, because initially I wasn't in the starting lineup. Probably about after halfway through the season, my first year, I made it to the starting lineup, and I haven't looked back since throughout that process. But like I said, it took a lot of hard work. It took a lot of hours in the gym, sitting with the coaches, understanding what your role is. Because I recall, again, even before I really exploded a little bit on the national stage in Grenada, I remember playing for Chef Castle Center Sixers, right? We didn't have a coach. We would have a lot of, battles with Sparklers, a lot of battles with the Carnage team that was coached by Joe Mann. A lot of battles with the teams from Grenville and Patrick Simmons and Bragat and Sincere and those guys, Ulrich Schoon, all those guys, right? There's my wife commenting saying Savion Jackson's following in his father's footsteps. Yeah, absolutely. My younger son, 14-year-old freshman, he really likes basketball and wants to follow in my footsteps and do exactly what I did. So I gotta give him a shout out and mention that. About that. But yeah, those guys that I played with, there were a lot of battles with those guys that I really appreciated that type of competition. But moving here, it was a little bit it was a little bit different because now I had a coach. I had a number of coaches, right? There back home, we self-organized so much. Chef Castle 76ers didn't have a coach, right? We coached ourselves and we won championships and were competitive. But, if I was on the bench, I was a coach. If Justin Hazard was on the bench, he was a coach. If Shane Derby was on the bench, he was a coach. So we rotated the responsibility that way growing up, right? But when I got here, I had to figure out what my true role was and be really good at that. So that's also working on my game, working with the coaches to get me there.
Okay. Ryan Boyle.
Yes, Ryan Boyle went to NDNU with me. He's one of my best friends up here. I haven't seen him in a little bit, but thanks for the shout out, Ryan.
Right. And the NDNU is Notre Dame. Yeah, University. Well, that's interesting that friends are linking up and seeing you. So what Johnny are some of the concerns you have? And I say concerns in the context of if there are any, in terms of the the development of basketball in Grenada. And I mean, being candid as well, not that you actually in Grenada, but obviously you might be observing, you might be listening, we have been probably speaking to folks and things. But what are some of the concerns you will have? And you go to Grenada from time to time,
Right.
In terms of the whole development of the sport in Grenada.
Well, I tell you what, I'm a bit disappointed because I'm 30 years removed from playing, or over 30 years removed from playing basketball in Grenada, and it doesn't seem like anything has changed. It seems like it's gotten worse, right? In terms of the development, I'm hearing that there aren't any youth level tournaments and leagues to develop the youth, right? To replenish the talent as guys move on and move on in their lives, and where basketball isn't that important anymore. Now you got to think about, okay, going pro in something as being like an accountant or something like that, right? As opposed to going pro and playing basketball. So as guys move on, how are we replenishing that talent? It doesn't seem like the support is there. There isn't a support infrastructure that I'm aware of, and I could be wrong, but I do speak to folks from time to time. I don't see a national support infrastructure that's built, that's from the youth level up through the high schools all the way up to the national team level. To me, there's only one way to build that. That's the way it is here. That support structure is everywhere. The city I live in is probably about twice the size of Grenada in terms of population, but there is that infrastructure available. We have a travel team called Atwater Flight, and we travel, from this city to cities 30 miles away, an hour away, 2 hours away, and then we begin our season in January, and we end at Memorial Day tournament in Lake Tahoe, which is like a huge tournament for all the AAU travel teams that are at respective levels. So we got teams that are beginning from third grade all the way up to high school. And a couple of years ago, my son Savion, his team, I was a seventh grade team, won the championship at Lake Tahoe. And I've been coaching that team since they were in the third grade. We finally got to the level where we were able to win the entire thing. And that type of development is important because as the kids develop and they get older, a lot of the skills that they learn on the way up, it's stuff that they can build upon. And there's a natural progression, as you go throughout the sport. My son right now, both my boys, know way more than I did at the age of 14 about the sport of basketball because of that natural progression starting from third grade. So I think that's important. And once they get to high school, there gotta be high school programs available, camps for them to go to learn more. There has to be the support network for high school sports where there's that intercollegiate type of exposure and engagement so that they can play solid competition around the island. There got to be more games. You can't play 6 games a year and say you did something. You're talking about 30 to 40 games per year, and we got to get together with those power that be that have the authority to organize these things on an island-wide level to build that infrastructure and put that into place. Same thing for the national team. The national team can't just go to one tournament like the Windward Islands tournament where there's four teams and play 3 games. There got to be invitational games that where you invite teams that are coming from other islands, or maybe even high school teams. The high school teams up here are pretty good, or even college teams that are first-year college teams. You can invite them down to play your national team to get them engaged, because part of your success in this sport is doing, right? There's repetition that's necessary, and if you don't have that, you're not going to improve. So, to answer your question, I'm really disappointed. 30 years plus later, things have seemed to gotten worse, and not sure why. I see other sports. I hear about other individuals excelling in other sporting disciplines. It seems like there is a support network there. I'm not sure what's happening with basketball.
But what you have seen, are you still confident that it has what it takes in terms of talents from the island? And again, I'm saying, you're not in Grenada per se, so it has to be probably when you visit or what you probably would have seen probably on social media. Do you still think that, there is talents, that are available and worthy of it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Our island, no matter the sporting discipline, there's a ton of talent everywhere. And to me, the discipline that our kids have as a result of the culture that they grew up in, it's something that's like different from what you experience when you're in the United States. Like I said, this generation here, they expect a lot, entitlement. That because of our culture and because of our values that we grew up with on the island, the work ethic, it seems to be built in, right? So no matter what sport they choose to go after, and we're talking about basketball, I do think that there is the talent there. Problem is there are no facilities. I remember being back there in 2016 and driving down to Grandland's Beach, and Grandland's court, there are no backboards, there are no rims. There's grass growing in between the concrete. What's happening with that? Why did it have to get to that level? I walk by Melville Street Court, yeah, the backboards and stuff are still up, but it doesn't look like it's been resurfaced in a while. And speaking with Coach Naka, it seems like the Sparklers basketball court was demolished. In order to play, we need facilities. There's no one person, that can do that. It has to be a collaborative effort. It has to start with, the people at the national associations that have access to resources that can help maintain and build facilities. I can't imagine 30 years removed, there isn't an indoor facility in Grenada, a true indoor facility. And I'm not talking about Library Court, So, yeah, absolutely, the talent is there. But they need access to quality facilities to compete with those, at the next level.
Some agreement. Joel Phillip is saying, I agree, we need to have basketball starting from the primary school level so that children are able to start learning the basics in the sport. Yes, let me say, remember all the comments. Remember all those reporters all over you when Grenada won the OECS championship. That's many moons ago, eh?
Is that my sister? Yeah, that's my sister, Jen.
Jen Thomas, yeah. And then there is Clef State. The exercise disciplines take hard work at the college level. You're dispensable if you're not dependable and responsible.
Absolutely.
No idle time for foolishness. Very much.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, indeed. But let's okay, and Glenn Alexander, old time PBC folks. I guess as much you know Glenn.
Of course.
Yeah, but let's see if we can get something. Okay, that's where we are now. What year was this, Johnny?
You're supposed to hide that picture. What are you doing?
What year was that?
Put that out there for public consumption. Now it's over.
Yeah. That was back in 19 what? Because I have you circled there, but
1988, 89, something like that.
89, yeah. Some very familiar faces as we were going through this. We see the Wagiti just above you there.
Yeah.
Yes. There is Marquez to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, arms folded. Very good basketballers, you know. But that was a football team, as you will notice. So
Right.
another indication of Johnny's involvement, not just in basketball, but also football, and representing the Institute for Further Education back then. Yeah.
I got to tell you, though, there's a couple guys in that picture. Gerard Sincere to the far left in the back, and you mentioned Marquez. Those two guys I grew up with through basketball. Well, Gerard and I went to PBC together, but Marquez was a very formidable opponent for Sparklers. You know, without that level of competition, every time we met, you know, it brought that extra emphasis to the game that was important for me in my development. Same thing with Gerard. He played for the Labe team, right? Even though we were friends coming up and playing for PBC together, we were like enemies on the court when it came to playing for our respective clubs. You know, so I want to give a shout out to those two guys. You know, hope everything's going well with them and their family.
Okay. And just before we leave that photo there, two familiar faces there. Well, I mean, among familiar faces, as we say, Wagiti Wayne Redhead.
Yes.
Is there, and then we also have Lester Smith, you know, Lester Smith.
And Glendon Langine next.
Well, Glendon, and there's Leslie Smith as well. So, and then Dexter DT, you know.
DT in the back.
Yeah, at the back, yeah. So very familiar faces there.
Absolutely.
In those days, playing for the Institute for Further Education, then IFE, you know. Yep. Patrice says, my former co-worker at Inland Revenue Department.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, Patricia is heavily involved in football in Grenada, you know.
I wasn't aware of it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, she is. She's involved. She has quite a lot. She has been, you know, involved in the football, especially the administrative part at times.
That's good.
Yeah, women's football. But let's get on, as we have a couple of minutes there. We'll probably just, you know, come in and back, in and between with some comments. But going back to our opening salvo there with your Lakers, yeah, at the back, you know, do you think tomorrow night will be it?
Oh yeah, it's Championship Friday. Yeah, we're gonna lock down and win it. You know, I have a friend of mine that we're getting together with a couple others, and we're all Laker fans, so we're gonna be cheering them on, celebrating that championship. I'm predicting, guaranteed, we're winning tomorrow, right?
But don't you think Miami will have other plans probably to spoil the party?
Of course. They can have all the plans they want. They're not going to spoil the party. You know, plans are just plans. You got to execute them to make them work, right?
Okay. Well, I say that from you.
Hey, guys can tell you they had a lot of plans to try to stop me back home, and it didn't necessarily work because they had to execute them at the end of the day.
And you think you're the good friend Kobe Bryant, well, I've seen Kobe Bryant because I think, as they were saying, that once the Lakers can secure that championship, they will probably say, in memory of Kobe.
I'm pretty sure it's a good punchline.
Yeah,
a good story, right? So Why not? I think it was also announced that they're going to be wearing the new Black Mamba jerseys, those uniforms. So it'll be a fitting tribute to a really great player for them to pull it out tomorrow.
Mhm. And despite the circumstances for this year's championship with the pandemic and what the NBA had to actually do in terms of the bubble and all these things, you thought overall the championship was very competitive?
Oh yeah. From the first round when we played Portland and then Denver right after that, those games were really exciting. Everyone, even with the Miami series, they're a team that they don't quit, right? They always keep coming at you. So you got to be, really locked in, really focused to pull that game out because you may think you have a 12, 15 point lead. That means nothing, you know? So those games were really exciting. I really enjoyed it. The bubble type environment, in my opinion, was absolutely necessary to kind of limit any potential for spreading the virus because if that got loose in the bubble, there's no way they could continue. It's kind of the same concern I had for Grenada when this first happened and there were the first few cases that occurred. I think we did a really good job of, locking things down to ensure that, the spread was limited. I think to date that we don't have any more cases. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's fantastic because the state of healthcare in Grenada. It's not good. So if that had happened there, would have been a bit of a disaster. And I'm glad that the authorities took the necessary steps to shut that down as much as possible.
Mhm. Okay, so Marcus Knott, I guess as much has to be
Marcus Knott is a colleague of mine. He worked at a same high school with my wife. I even coached against him when I coached high school basketball. So he's a really good friend of mine. I didn't even know he was on here. So
yeah. And I guess Johnny, throughout your tenure, you would have been able to make some very formidable friends, especially through basketball, lifelong to some extent, even though some may have gone other parts of the world.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had friends that were able to go on to play Division One basketball. I have one that actually got an invite to play for the Lakers and was drafted on a short 10-day contract. I have one that is playing overseas, has been playing overseas for several years, and I've just returned. Lives in Seattle. So I have some really lifelong relationships, and it's one of the crazy things is I never wanted to get Facebook in the beginning, right? But it's through Facebook I was able to make those connections because kind of everyone went their separate ways after college, and it was really difficult to stay in contact without social media. So with social media, I was able to rekindle some of those connections. So yeah, absolutely. I have several friends that are not playing anymore, but doing something different in their life.
And what's about Grenada?
Yeah, absolutely. Same. For a very long time after I left, because I wasn't able to come back immediately. I might want to also mention that while I was here, I really got to thank my parents for assisting me through the process because there wasn't any assistance from the National Association to get through college. It was what my parents could have done for me and what I was able to do for myself with on-campus employment and stuff like that. And it's kind of sad to hear that, that's still happening for individuals that were fortunate enough to have a scholarship opportunity to leave the island to pursue their dream through higher education and playing that sport. There just wasn't any type of support that was given by our national associations to help them to continue along their way. So yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that I wish didn't happen that way, but without it, I wouldn't be where I am right now.
And you're hoping too that could probably even extend some of the, because you did mention that you know, worthy talents in Grenada, but as you say, the support system you believe is not there, and I hope that this could be an extension of some sort of support for these youngsters.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, the support once the opportunity arises, recruitment is different now, especially with COVID. Um, Access to video, film, solid film that is probably less than 5 minutes long. So you're looking at the list of highlights, not you're looking for a whole 2 hour long video, right? A list of highlights, looking at various skill sets that you have. Social media platform Twitter has become really critical in the recruiting process because that's kind of free environment where coaches can interact with anyone. So you post your stuff out there, they can see it, they can reach out to you, they can DM you, but they can't do official visits. So during COVID, it's really difficult to have any official type of visit with a coach, but you can interact with them via Twitter. So that has been really instrumental in terms of changing the recruiting platform. And those are things that you won't know unless you're going through it yourself, right? So being able to understand that and provide some type of guidance to young athletes that don't know is critical. It's important because a lot of times when you're an athlete in Grenada, you're pursuing it on your own. Yeah, your parents are kind of involved here or there, but they depend on you to bring the information back to them to tell them, okay, what's the next step, right? And if the coaches aren't doing it, who is? If the National Association isn't helping the coaches on how to go through that process, who is? And that leads to the standstill, the stagnation that we've been having in the sport over the years.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. And for those who are wondering, that familiar face that you're seeing there, as we spoke about Major Jackson, right? That's
Yeah.
And you realize it's a black and white. Thanks, Clef Defredine, for that photo of Major Jackson, and that probably would have been Clef probably can correct me whether he was playing for. That seems to be club football. The uniform seems to be like
Yeah.
Occam's something like that. So, but that was Major Jackson then playing football, not former national footballer. He played cricket.
Not that I'm aware of. He may have, but
yeah, I think, but he made his name in football in Grenada.
Right.
And just before we leave, this is my best, and mind me, it's although it's 5 years old, I think this is my best photo.
Oh.
That's my best photo. That's the family photo. Although it's 5 years old. So that's Angela's wife.
Yes.
And the kids. I think
Jalon to the right of me. That's Neilani, my daughter, in the middle, and Savion right next to my wife.
Right. Even though it's 5 years old, I still think it's a beautiful family photo.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So really, really appreciate you being on our program this evening. Well, still afternoon in your neck of the woods. And, you have been communicating with those former basketballers like Billard McIntyre and Kimon Christopher and others.
Yes, absolutely. Bilal lives about 45 minutes away from me. Actually, when my brother Andrew showed up to see me last month, surprised me totally, right? And we went up and visited Bilal because he and Bilal went to school together, went to PBC together. Kimon lives about 20, 30 minutes away from me. So I check in with those guys every now and then, say hello, and we chop it up, over old times,
No time to play some hoops?
Not me, no. If I'm playing hoops, I'm sitting in a corner shooting jumpers. That's it. I'm not rebounding, doing nothing. My knees are gone. I had a couple really serious injuries. I tore my right ACL, right, and had to get that surgically repaired. I also had a compound fracture here on my arm. I don't know if you can see that. There's a long ass scar right there. It's about, gosh, I had about 9 pins. I played with 9 pins in there. That happened in my senior year in college, right before playoffs. So that pretty much ended my career. So I tend to, I get involved. I stay close to the sport by coaching. You know, I coach my kids. And I coach the high school team here in town. And that's about it, you know.
Wow. Despite the injury, despite the retirement, you're still involved.
I am still involved in some capacity, sharing the knowledge.
Yeah. Okay then. Well, thank you very much, Johnny,
Sure.
and all the best to you and family.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay then.
Take care.
You're welcome,
Thanks
Johnny.
for having me. Appreciate
Okay
it.
then. Okay, folks, that's Johnnie Jackson. Yes, he was, giving us the whole rundown of what it is like for Johnnie Jackson now. Well, folks, let me tell you, on Saturday, we have a different sort of format. It will be almost like an open discussion. So for those of you who listening and watching and want to be part of it, we'll be discussing many things, various topics, sports related though, and you have the opportunity to be part of the program, not just with comments, but actually being involved, being on camera. So get your camera and your lights, tune up, and you will be part of Saturday's program. That's the Saturday Sports special program where we'll be discussing, various sporting issues, various sporting topics. I know it should be an interesting thing because it's an opportunity to learn from those who would have experienced, those who would be willing to share, sporting stories from years gone by. I know Clev and Toro and all the others obviously will be in tune with that. We'd like to hear from you. You have been part of the program. You have been providing a lot of tips, suggestions, etc., comments. But we want to hear what you want to say, some of the things that you probably can share from back then, the 70s, what it was like as for those of you who are not, a sportsman, just a sports enthusiast, as a spectator, going and supporting, even though you would have played probably, to some extent, you would have been involved to some extent. What it is can you share with the young viewers, the young listeners, those who are watching? What it is you want to share? What it is you think they should know from the years gone by? What it is missing? We have a lot to discuss. It's an idea that was thrown to me, and I said it was about 2 weeks ago, and I thought about it, and I say, hey, no. It's an opportunity for us to discuss this week. So on Saturday from 1 o'clock, we'll be discussing various issues. So it'll be an opportunity for whether it's basketball, whether it's football, whether it's cricket, whether it's track and field, whatever the sport, whatever the topic relating to sports, it's your opportunity to be part of it. So join us on Saturday from 1 o'clock. And then hopefully next Thursday, we'll be on the ball at 6:30. I can tell you there's most likely will be former boxing legend Bernard Bunny Wilson should be with us come next Thursday on the TalkSports program from 6:30. Until then, Saturday, 1 o'clock. See you.